In a statement to ABC News, the Smithsonian wrote that they are reviewing the letter from the administration and will, quote, collaborate constructively with the White House. And the statement from the Smithsonian goes on to say that the Smithsonian's work is grounded in a deep commitment to scholarly excellence, rigorous research, and the accurate factual presentation of history. Our next guest is deeply familiar with the administration of museums. Historian and retired professor of museum studies, Marjorie Schwarzer, joins us now. Marjorie, it is good to see you. Thank you so much for spending your night with us here. So I understand you've read the directive from the White House right now. What's your reaction to what the Trump administration is requesting from these 8 Smithsonian museums?
So thank you so much, Gio. I've actually read it several times, and it's very clear that whoever wrote it really doesn't understand museums, doesn't know how they work, doesn't know how they operate, doesn't know how exhibitions are developed, what curators do. And so it really seems to me to be more of a scare tactic or related to some larger initiative about controlling a certain kind of narrative about American history.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about this code of ethics that the Smithsonian uses to guide its work, because I think a lot of people are probably unfamiliar with that.
So all museums operate under a code of ethics, and there are strict codes of ethics for all accredited museums in the country, as well as museums around the world through the International Committee of Museums. The Smithsonian, and particularly the Smithsonian's leadership, have been at the forefront of ethics and these of guiding ethics and of pushing ethics towards authentic history, towards fact-driven history, towards collaboration. All the words that were mentioned in the document that they put out are ethical values that are held by everybody who works within the Smithsonian. They deal with collections, with educational messaging, and with the process, the very complicated and community driven process of creating exhibitions.
Yeah, and if you've been to a Smithsonian, you know how complicated that must be. The White House says that this review is in accordance with President Trump's executive order, and it's entitled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. What do you make of that overall effort, and is it typical of a U.S. president?
Nothing like this has ever happened in history. There have been instances with a certain exhibition where a senator wanted to score some political points and wanted a certain exhibition to change its direction or change a label, something like that. But nothing like this has ever happened in the history of the US. It has happened in other authoritarian countries. I think about the Maoist cultural revolution in China. I think about the Taliban. I think about Khomeini in Iran and so on. But for this to happen in the United States is truly extraordinary.
And as you know, obviously you're a historian. You know how important it is for historians to put things into context, and sometimes explanations about certain things change over time. And over the last 50 years, the Smithsonian, of course, has institutionally changed its lens on American history to broaden that viewpoint from which it's told. Tell us a little bit about those changes.
So those changes really started to bubble up with the bicentennial celebration in 1976 and the expansion of our idea of history and of local history, and away from like great white men and sort of a Christian white paternalistic narrative that I had that from my childhood. I've been going to the Smithsonian since I was a kid. I was brought up in Washington, D.C. So a change from that perspective to a much wider perspective where you bring in multiple voices and multiple perspectives, and you trust the visitor and the public to look at an object and really make their own decision based on facts about what that means. And if we have time, can I give you one example? Do we have time?
Sure, we just have a few seconds, but let's go for it.
Okay, so I'm thinking about when I was growing up in DC and would go to the Smithsonian, you never saw anything about slavery, about labor rights, about women, about the Japanese internment. And we really didn't tell that history. And I remember going back to the Smithsonian when I was an adult in the early 1990s and seeing a whites only water fountain. And I remembered it from my childhood, from growing up in DC during the end of the Jim Crow era, but there it was as a museum artifact. And it
Mm.
spoke so powerfully to me, that one object. And that's what the Smithsonian's ace in the hole. They have the objects, they have the evidence. And so what the Smithsonian has been doing is curating and putting the evidence out there and just letting it speak to people and letting elders share those stories with younger people. They really resonate. And there are, I'm going to say, millions of resonant objects that the Smithsonian has. It's an extraordinary institution.
Well, I so appreciate that you spent time with us and actually told that story, because I think that's a very powerful one. Marjorie Schwarzer, thank you so much for joining us here on Prime.
Thank you, Gio.